Right then, another RS3 video. So if you don't know what this is, watch the first one. And then if you want to see us using it, watch the second one. Because if you look here, it looks exactly the same as it did halfway through that video. Because I confidently said I could get another gearbox for this car, and it turns out I couldn't get one in time. So we ended up taking that gearbox back out and taking that down to the team that we bought this off, so they had a spare gearbox, which it turned out they needed a spare engine this weekend. But anyway, it is what it is.
That's how long that you've made us take that gearbox out at 2 o'clock on Friday when we were going to be racing at 3.
What Jake just said, he weren't happy about it. So anyway, while it's here on ramp, good time to look at things, because race cars, people like race cars, and I don't think it's often anybody's had a look under a TCR car and picked and poked and stuff. But anyway, we'll quickly look. The engine pretty much looks standard, nothing fancy going on there. Standard dual mass flywheel, just one you can order for this, no fancy there. Radiators are standard on them, nothing fancy there again. The intercooler, that's a TTI RS1, sat up on the top with them silly ductings on, which we've talked about that before. Massive brake ducts with some nice fancy aluminium like bolt-on pieces that are covered in oil and grease and crap. So I'm disappointed that I touched it. This specific car's got the second brake duct edition, which is quite an expensive upgrade, but it needs some more rolls on it, but that keeps them even cooler. So we've got a fair bit of CV grease going on in here, but ignoring that, these hubs are a custom part, nothing factory about them. These are a specific thing to the TCRs. The interesting thing about these hubs, it's a factory wheel bearing with a little spigot welded on, because the brake discs, the bells are really, really thick on these, so that's obviously adding to the width. Some nice wheel studs. We've talked about brakes before. But the interesting thing about them, the hubs are the same left and right, so where the ball joint, the steering arm bolts in, there's a bracket here and an extra brace there, so it's quite, this is held on really, really well. It's in double shear and it's got an extra brace, but that bracket is the same spacing as the caliper, so there's actually no, other than these little sort of shims here to bring it out to the disc. I'm assuming they made them for a smaller disc and then moved them, but that's the same bolt spacing as that, so these hubs can be used on the left and the right. So in theory you only need one spare upright if you're running one of these cars and only planning to rip one corner off. Factory ball joint, which I think is a bit strange. And then up there you can see the top mount completely fixed on these. This looks like it's got a stiffer set of springs on as well, which is odd. They look quite stiff then, so we're going to change that out because these don't like a stiff spring. But tons of caster on these, about 10 or 11 degrees, maybe even more. Need to measure it to be sure, because what the book tells you and what you get is not always the same. But I think that's too much. We need to take a bit off. So we'll see. Another thing that we didn't see earlier, that I don't know how easily you can see it, but you can see there, this has got endurance spec brake hoses and stuff, and that's a dry brake, so you could literally swap the entire brake caliper mid-race if you wanted to. But anyway, that brake hose has got a right bend in it. Hopefully that's a 90-degree fitting. But anyway, engine-wise, this little pipe here comes from that catch can. You can see up there, which obviously that's a racing part. It goes in a little one-way valve, which then shoves into where the drain plug normally is, and there's just a little bracket holding that from popping out, which is a bit scary if you ask me. All the engines are sealed, so these have to go back to set after, I think it's 10,000 kilometres, something like that. Five they go for a refresh, 10 they need replacing. Absolutely massive downpipe, loads of heat shielding. I think probably 3 inch inside, but then like an inch of heat shielding each side of that. So it's massive, which that'll probably be why these don't get too hot inside. Looks like this has had a bit of seam welding all the way. Not the best seam covering, but it's all welded, which we should have done a bit more on the TTs if we could. But anyway, straight through exhaust, literally as straight as an exhaust could possibly get, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, front subframe then. So this is everything on this is pretty much a non-factory part as far as ordering it from VW Motorsport. The steering rack apparently has got remapped control unit. Steering arms are all modified with a rose joints, which obviously go in between the hub there with these little space and stuff, and all that CV grease. Anti-roll bar, which you can get in a few different thicknesses. It's a hollow one, so it's lighter, a bit simpler, and it also goes onto the custom arms, which I think we'll flip over in a second and have a look. A couple of little modifications like this sort of bit plate welded on. Not 100% sure why that's been done. Doesn't look like the steering rack has been moved in relation to anything else, which you'd think it maybe would. I don't know. You could move it up and down and play with Ackerman and stuff. So then you can see the dog bone bush here, which is just 2 rose joints and an aluminium spacer that presses in, so that's why these are quite stiff. And then this is quite an interesting bit. So this is what you'd think was a camber adjustment. So you've got a little threaded rod here that you can adjust, slacken these bolts off, adjust that, and it pulls the wheel in and out, which you think could be how you adjust the camber, but it's not. We'll put a little excerpt from the manual for these on the screen now, but how you'd adjust the camber on these, you do it using the tow arm as such and get the desired camber, and then you use this at the bottom with the standard ball joint bolts on, and you pull the toe back into position, and there's a relationship between these two that means you can do it without actually string lining. Once you know the car's square, then you can add the camber and add the toe as you see fit, which is pretty good. So as you can see on the underneath of the subframe as well, this is one of the areas that's been changed. You see this bit that they've welded in here. This is to lift the arms up to get the roll centre higher, which is similar to what we've tried to achieve on the standard subframes that we've put on the TTs. Not sure if we've done anything on that yet, but not sure how much they've got that up by, but it can't be much because this really does get in the way there. But it's quite a, I won't say elegant solution what they've done. It's not difficult to achieve. Again, just a bit of box section, hack away at this, slot it in, and away you go. So I think that is pretty much everything on the front. I don't know if I've missed anything. I'm sure I have. Any questions, let me know. We can have a little poke in the next video. But anyway, onto the rear. This is where things have got a little bit more modified. So this is the massive tank. Inside here, there'll be a bag. This is just a cover. Air jacks there, just tucked out that way. So this is a factory arm that's been chopped, and there's a little laser cut piece with some rose joints on here, which we'll put up a picture of what we've got on our cars, which is Berkline part that's probably, I'd say, a bit better than this. Rose jointed at that end, obviously. Not checked against the standard one what the geometry is like on these, because I'm assuming it's moved. So because of this tank, they've had to chop. There's normally a brace that sort of comes out a little bit around here. They've chopped that out and put just a straight bar in, which then has got the anti-roll bar links on, which, again, this is an all anti-roll bar. You can get a few different diameters, and it's adjustable as well. Not sure how much difference it makes, but there's a fair difference in it. Camber arm, that's just a factory one. See, standard VW part numbers on it here somewhere. And then the upgraded VW Motorsport parts there. That's come loose on the last track day. It was tight before and it's loose now. And then this is where these differ quite a lot from the Mark 7 platform that these are sort of based upon. This is normally the spring mount, which still got the factory pickup at this end, which is a bit odd. Still got them in. I'd have thought they'd have locked these off or something, but they've not. Obviously rose jointed, straight to there, and it's got quite a big weird fitting going in here. I don't know whether that's like that just for weight. I'm not sure how else you could do it, but anyway. And then because the spring's not on here, that's on the rear hub, which the rear hub and the rear wheel bearing are sort of pretty much, a bit of crap in there, pretty much a factory part. But there's a few little changes, like this piece is not available separately and this piece is not available separately. So you have to buy all the apart from VW Motorsport at, I'm sure, a ridiculous cost. And then this should have all-in shocks on, but we've got Bilsteins on this one. The valving in these is quite aggressive. Solid top mounts up there as well, so that's pretty good. Spring rate on them looks about right. Maybe it's a little bit stiffer, I'm not too sure. We'll have to measure them and look at what's on them. So you can see how much the camber arm moved down, which that, from what we've seen, will give us more dynamic camber. So when you load the wheel up, the camber will not increase by a small amount, it'll increase by a big amount, which is what you want. These two have to be moved in relation to each other to keep the bump steer correct, but lifting this arm up has got the same effect as what lifting the arm up on the front got, and that's going to give you a better roll centre, which will stop the car moving around. There's no point lowering your car if then your roll centre drops below ground level. You move, I can't remember the exact term now, suspension experts will be screaming at me, but it's basically the relationship between your centre of gravity and your roll centre. You lower the centre of gravity by 20 mil, you might lower your roll centre by 40 or 50 mil, which that means the lever ratio between them is increased, which is basically like pushing down harder on the car. So even though you've lowered the car, you've made it easier for the suspension geometry to push the wheel up or let the car roll over as such. So that's kind of what we were doing with the TT, and we experimented and found it seemed to be better when we had it factory, so a worse roll centre at the rear, which would mean it'd skid more and you need stiffer springs, stuff like that. But we think the valving's still wrong on our dampers, so we'll see. These cars clearly work because these are the cars that we're chasing. This weekend out in the TT, we gave pretty much all the TCR cars a run for their money except Rob and Carl in theirs. In the TT, if it were dry, I don't think we would have done, but it was wet and we did. So we've clearly made a bit of progress there. So anyway, I'm sure there's loads of other stuff that people want to see under here, but there's not tons of weird stuff going on. Obviously all the carbon bits, and this is fiberglass, this bit, which is still a ridiculous amount of money. Cat's here, best place for a cat. So we're going to see, because these cars were built to run on slicks, you can get like, I think the factory, you can have like 6 degrees camber, 6 or 7 degrees camber. We're only at probably 4, 4.5. We probably want to take some caster out, not sure. Have a play with the settings, make sure the shockers are all good, and start again playing with a car basically. But we'll see. This is the kind of benchmark for the TT. Whatever we do with this, if we go out and we can beat it in the TTs, then happy days, we're doing pretty well. Scott wants to put a diesel in this. I'm not sure if we're gonna, I doubt it, but let's see how we get on. Cars are getting crashed into at racing at the minute. We're going to need a new car every weekend, but we shall see. So if this has been interesting, if I've missed anything, if anybody wants to see anything specific inside, outside, underneath the TCR cars, let us know. We'll do another video if people want us to, if there's enough interest, and we'll answer any of your questions in the comments and in a future video if we need to. And Danny keeps saying I need to do it, but when we look on his analytics, it's like 10% of people are subscribers. We're not getting 900,000 views, so why are you not subscribed? Why are all the subscribers not watching all of his videos? Answer that in comments if you want to. Thank you.